The red dot appeared on William Mahon's chest at exactly 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening in December 2019, inside Carbone's restaurant on Thompson Street in Manhattan's Greenwich Village. Laura Flock, a 28-year-old waitress carrying a tray of linguine à la vongole, had maybe 3 seconds to make a decision that would change everything. She didn't think. She just moved. What happened next set off a chain of events that would expose one of the most sophisticated criminal operations in New York City history, reveal shocking corruption at the highest levels of law enforcement, and transform an ordinary young woman into someone who'd never be ordinary again. But to understand that moment, that split second when Laura saw death coming and refused to let it arrive, you need to understand who William Mahon really was, and why someone wanted him dead badly enough to take a shot in one of Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishments. William Mahon wasn't your grandfather's mob boss. At 51 years old, he had built something unprecedented in the modern era of American organized crime. A criminal enterprise so technologically sophisticated and so deeply woven into legitimate business that even the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force couldn't fully map its operations. Born in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, in 1968, William grew up in the shadow of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, in a neighborhood where certain names were spoken with respect and others not spoken at all. His father ran a small construction company that did work for connected contractors. His mother worked as a bookkeeper for a waste management firm in Staten Island that everyone knew was a front for something else. But William was different from the beginning. While other kids in the neighborhood were getting into street-level schemes, William was studying economics at St. John's University. While they were making short-term scores, he was learning about offshore banking, cryptocurrency, and the dark web before most people knew those terms existed. By the early 2000s, William had established himself not as a traditional mob boss, but as what federal prosecutors would later call the architect, someone who built criminal infrastructure that other organizations could use. He created sophisticated money laundering networks through a chain of seemingly legitimate businesses. Luxury car dealerships in Long Island City, art galleries in Chelsea, tech startups in Brooklyn's Dumbo neighborhood, and high-end restaurants throughout Manhattan. His flagship legitimate business was Mahon Capital Group, headquartered in a sleek office building on 6th Avenue in Midtown. To outsiders, it looked like a typical private equity firm, and in many ways it was. William genuinely invested in real businesses, generated actual returns for real investors, and employed legitimate financial professionals who had no idea about the other side of the operation. The genius of William's system was that his criminal enterprise and legitimate business were so intertwined that taking one down would mean destroying the other. And that meant destroying jobs, investments, and institutions that powerful people cared about protecting. Every organization needs trusted people, and William had assembled a crew that reflected his modern approach to organized crime. Damian Gaynell was William's second-in-command, a 47-year-old former Marine Corps intelligence officer who had served in Iraq before returning to civilian life and finding legitimate work unfulfilling. Damian handled security and counterintelligence, using military-grade surveillance detection and encryption technology to keep the organization ahead of law enforcement. He operated out of a nondescript office in Long Island City that was registered as a corporate security consulting firm, which, technically, it was. Violet Nelson was the organization's financial architect, a 39-year-old who had worked for Goldman Sachs before quietly leaving after discovering she had a talent for seeing opportunities in the gray areas of international finance. She was brilliant, calculating, and completely loyal to William. Violet managed a network of shell companies spanning from Delaware to the Cayman Islands to Malta, creating financial structures so complex that forensic accountants needed months just to understand how money flowed through them. Deborah "Deb" Patterson ran operations, which meant she managed the actual criminal activities. High-end theft rings, sophisticated fraud schemes, and cybercrime operations that targeted corporate databases and cryptocurrency exchanges. A 42-year-old former NYPD detective who had left the force under unclear circumstances, Deborah understood law enforcement tactics better than anyone in the organization. She operated from a legitimate private investigation firm in Tribeca that actually did real, legal investigative work alongside its more questionable activities. Then there was Nelson Wright, no relation to Violet despite sharing a last name, who handled enforcement. But Nelson wasn't a traditional enforcer. At 35, he was a former college wrestler from Penn State who had become a high-level collections specialist. His job wasn't violence. It was pressure. He knew how to find leverage on anyone, how to make problems expensive enough that people chose to cooperate rather than resist. Nelson worked out of a legal collections agency in Forest Hills, Queens, that pursued genuine debt collection alongside more specialized assignments. This was William's inner circle, and they met every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. at a coffee shop in the financial district called Blue Spoon Cafe, where they discussed business that sounded completely legitimate to anyone overhearing. Which was the point. Laura Flock had been working at Carbone's restaurant for 3 years when she saved William Mahon's life, but her background made her perhaps the only person in that restaurant who could have recognized what was happening fast enough to act. She had grown up in Tucson, Arizona, where her father, retired Army Ranger Marcus Flock, ran a private security training facility that taught executive protection to bodyguards and security personnel. From age 12, Laura had spent summers learning threat assessment, tactical awareness, and emergency response. Her father had trained her the same way he trained professional bodyguards, not because he expected her to enter the field, but because he believed everyone should know how to protect themselves and recognize danger. Laura had come to New York at 24 to pursue acting, like thousands of other young people with dreams bigger than their bank accounts. She was talented. She'd landed a few small roles in off-Broadway productions, and had even had a line in an episode of Law and Order, SVU, that got cut in editing. But acting work was inconsistent, and the bills were constant. Carbone's, with its high-end clientele and generous tips, had become her primary income. She worked the dinner shift 5 nights a week, making enough to afford a small studio apartment in Astoria, Queens, and still attend auditions during the day. But what made Laura different from other waitstaff was that she never stopped running the threat assessment protocols her father had drilled into her. She noticed everything. Who sat where, who watched whom, which customers seemed nervous, which seemed too calm. She tracked exits, noted potential weapons, identified cover versus concealment. It was automatic, like breathing. Her co-workers thought she was just unusually attentive. Management loved her because she anticipated problems. The customer drinking too much, the couple about to have a loud argument, the person who might walk on a check. Laura always seemed to know what was about to happen. She had no idea that this constant vigilance was about to save a life and pull her into a world she'd only seen in movies. William Mahon had been dining at Carbone's every Thursday evening for 2 years. He always requested the same table, number 14, in the back corner with clear sight lines to both the entrance and the kitchen, positioned where the lighting created subtle shadows. He always arrived at 9:30 p.m., after the initial dinner rush, but before the late crowd. He usually came alone or with one associate, never more than 2 people. Laura had served him dozens of times. He was polite, professional, tipped exactly 25% every time, and never made small talk beyond basic pleasantries. She knew his order by heart. A Negroni to start, the rigatoni alla vodka, sometimes the veal, and always a double espresso to finish. He paid in cash, always hundreds, always exact. She'd figured out pretty quickly that William Mahon was someone significant. The way other customers reacted when they noticed him. Some with recognition, some with nervousness, some looking away too quickly. The way certain staff members got slightly tense when he arrived. The occasional presence of large men in good suits who sat at nearby tables and didn't really eat, just watched. Laura never asked questions. In her father's world, you learned to see without staring, know without asking, and mind your own business unless something directly concerned you. But she watched William with the same professional interest she brought to every aspect of her environment. She noted patterns, which associates he met with, what his mood seemed to be, whether his security was tight or relaxed. Not because she was gathering intelligence, but because her training made her analyze threats and protectors instinctively. Over time, she developed a strange respect for William. He treated service staff well, never snapped at anyone, and once left a $500 tip after learning that a busboy's father was in the hospital. He was demanding about quality, but never rude. In an industry where wealthy customers often treated staff like furniture, William Mahon treated them like human beings. Laura had no illusions about what he probably was, but she'd also grown up around her father's clients. some of whom protected very questionable people. She understood that the world wasn't simple, that people rarely fit into easy categories. December 12th, 2019, started as an ordinary Thursday. Laura arrived at Carbone's at 4 p.m. for the dinner shift. The restaurant was elegantly decorated for the holidays. Subtle white lights, evergreen arrangements, everything expensive and understated. The evening service began normally. Laura handled her section efficiently. A group celebrating an engagement, 2 business dinners, a couple on what appeared to be a first date. By 9:30 p.m., she was hitting her rhythm, moving between tables with practiced ease. William Mahon arrived at 9:35 p.m., 5 minutes later than usual, which Laura noted automatically. He was alone tonight, which was also unusual for a Thursday. Normally he met with Damien on Thursdays. Laura seated him at table 14, brought his Negroni, took his order, the rigatoni tonight, and moved on to other tables. The first sign something was wrong came at 9:43 p.m. A man Laura had never seen before entered the restaurant. Mid-30s, wearing a dark peacoat and jeans, too casual for Carbone's usual clientele. He didn't wait to be seated. He didn't look at the host's stand. His eyes went directly to the back of the restaurant, scanning, and then locked onto table 14. Laura's training kicked in instantly. Wrong body language. Too focused. Moving with purpose toward a target rather than looking for a table. She continued carrying a tray of appetizers to table 7, but her peripheral vision tracked the man. He was heading toward the kitchen entrance. The angle that would give him the best approach to table 14 with minimal line of sight from William's position. The second sign came when she noticed his right hand in his coat pocket, the pocket weighted down by something heavy. The fabric was slightly displaced in a way that suggested a mechanical object, not just a hand. Laura set down the appetizers at table 7 with practiced calm while her heartbeat accelerated. She had maybe 20 seconds before the man would reach his optimal position. She moved toward the kitchen, intercepting the man's path, her mind racing through options. She couldn't cause a scene without certainty. She couldn't accuse someone without proof. But every instinct trained into her by her father was screaming that something was about to happen. The man's hand came out of his pocket. Not a gun. A phone. But mounted on the phone was something Laura recognized from her father's advanced training courses. A laser sight attachment, military grade, designed to pair with a remote shooter. Her eyes flicked to the restaurant's front windows. Across Thompson Street, in a building under construction, she caught the briefest reflection of movement. A figure in a dark window, for stories up, positioned with a perfect angle into the restaurant. The red dot appeared on William Mahon's chest. Laura didn't think. She later couldn't even remember making the decision. She just moved. Her training had taught her that in a sniper situation, you don't have time to warn the target. By the time they process your warning and react, the shot's already fired. You have to physically move them out of the line of fire. She was carrying a tray of linguine alla vongole for table 12. She shifted her angle, accelerated her pace, and stumbled directly into table 14, dropping the entire tray onto William Mahon. Hot pasta, sauce, clams, and olive oil cascaded across him, and the impact of her body hitting the table drove William sideways out of his chair. He went down hard, and Laura went down with him, her body covering his. The front window shattered. The sound of breaking glass mixed with screams from customers. The man with the phone sprinted for the kitchen exit, and Laura, lying on top of a Mafia boss covered in linguine, felt William Mahon's hand grip her arm with surprising strength. "Don't move," he said quietly, his voice completely calm. "Second shot comes in 8 seconds. Laura stayed down. William was right. 7 seconds later, another shot came through the window, hitting the wall where William's head would have been if he'd stood up after the first shot. Then silence. "Now we move," William said. "Stay low." They crawled together toward the kitchen, William moving with practiced efficiency, Laura's training keeping her calm. Behind them, chaos erupted, customers screaming, staff running, glass everywhere. They reached the kitchen, and William pulled Laura through into the prep area. Damien appeared from somewhere. Laura hadn't even seen him in the restaurant, moving with military precision. "Back exit," Damien said. "Car's already there." "She comes with us," William said, still gripping Laura's arm. "William," Damien started. "She saved my life. She saw it before I did. She comes with us until we know it's safe." Laura wanted to argue, wanted to say she'd just call the police and give a statement, wanted to go home to her normal life. But she understood enough to know that normal had just ended. She'd seen the shooter. She'd interfered with a hit. And whoever had just tried to kill William Mahon now knew her face. She nodded and followed them out into the Manhattan night. The car was a black Mercedes S-Class with tinted windows, driven by a man who didn't introduce himself. They drove north through Manhattan traffic, Damien on his phone having rapid, quiet conversations, William watching the streets with the same calm he'd shown throughout the entire incident. Laura's hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally hitting her system, but her mind stayed clear. That was the training. Your body reacts after the threat, not during. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere safe, William said. Somewhere no one's going to look for you. For me. You just saved my life in front of 30 witnesses. That makes you valuable. To me, because I owe you everything. To whoever just tried to kill me, because you might have seen something useful. Until we know which side has more interest in finding you, you're staying where I can protect you. I should call the police. The police are already at the restaurant, Damien said without looking up from his phone. NYPD, FBI will probably be there within 20 minutes. Someone shot up a restaurant in Greenwich Village. This is going to be all over the news by morning. Then I need to give a statement. You will, William said. But not tonight. Tonight, whoever hired that shooter is expecting you to do exactly what you just said. Go to the police, give a statement, go home. That's when they'll come for you. Either to silence you or to grab you for leverage. Laura's training told her he was right, which was the most unsettling part of all this. She'd learned threat assessment from the best, and everything William was saying made tactical sense. Who are you? She asked. And don't tell me you're just a businessman. William smiled slightly. I'm someone who makes his living understanding how systems work. Financial systems, legal systems, criminal systems. I find inefficiencies and exploit them. Some of what I do is perfectly legal. Some of it exists in gray areas. Some of it isn't legal at all. But I'm not what you're probably thinking. What am I probably thinking? That I'm a traditional organized crime figure. I'm not. I don't run narcotics operations. I don't do violence. I built an organization that functions like a technology platform. We provide infrastructure and services to people who need things done outside traditional channels. We launder money, yes. We facilitate transactions that can't happen in normal markets, yes. We help people hide assets, move capital, and solve problems that can't be solved legally. But we're not gangsters in the old sense. That's a very fine distinction, Laura said. Maybe. But the distinction matters, because it means the person trying to kill me isn't a rival mob boss. It's someone who wants to disrupt a financial system that a lot of very powerful people depend on. And that makes this more complicated than a simple gang war. They arrived at a luxury apartment building on the Upper East Side, one of those anonymous glass towers where privacy was the main amenity. Damien led them through an entrance that bypassed the main lobby, up a service elevator, to a penthouse on the 42nd floor. The apartment was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, modern furniture, art that Laura suspected was worth more than she'd make in a decade. But it had the impersonal quality of a place no one actually lived in, a safe house designed for exactly situations like this. You'll stay here tonight, William said. Tomorrow we'll figure out the next steps. There are clothes in the bedroom, toiletries in the bathroom, food in the kitchen. Damien will be in the next unit if you need anything. The windows are bulletproof, the doors are reinforced, and the building's security system is comprehensive. I need to call people, Laura said. My roommate will worry. My father. No calls tonight, Damien said. Phone records can be tracked. Whoever made the hit has resources. They just tried to kill someone in the middle of Manhattan. We have to assume they have law enforcement contacts who can access phone logs. Tomorrow we'll get you a secure line, but tonight no calls. Laura wanted to argue but understood the logic. Her father had taught her about operational security. She knew Damien was right. One question, she said, looking at William. How did you know there'd be a second shot? You said 8 seconds. William smiled. Because I've been expecting someone to try this for 3 weeks. This wasn't the first attempt. It was just the first one that got close. The others were clumsier. A car trying to run me off the road in Queens. A suspicious package at my office that turned out to be filled with dirt. Amateur hour. But tonight was professional, coordinated sniper, spotter inside the restaurant, understanding of timing. That's why I knew the protocol. Professional shooters fire twice on high-value targets. First shot for the kill, second shot for anyone who tries to help. 8 to 10 second gap to let people think it's safe to move. Who wants you dead? Laura asked. That, William said, is what we're going to find out. The next morning, Laura woke in the unfamiliar bedroom to sunlight streaming through those huge windows. For a moment she forgot where she was, and then it all came back. The red dot, the shot, the chaos. She found clothes laid out for her, jeans, sweater, boots, all in her size, which was mildly unsettling. She dressed and found Damien in the kitchen, working on a laptop while coffee brewed. William's already at work, Damien said. He doesn't let assassination attempts disrupt his schedule. There's breakfast if you're hungry. I need to contact my father, Laura said. He'll know something's wrong. He taught me everything I used last night, and he's going to hear about the shooting on the news. If I don't call him, he'll start looking for me, and you don't want that. Damien looked up with interest. Why not? Because my father trains executive protection specialists and security personnel. He has contacts throughout law enforcement and private security. If he thinks I'm missing or in danger, he'll mobilize resources that will be very hard for you to manage quietly. Damien considered this, then nodded. Fair enough. I'll get you a secure phone. He made a call, and 20 minutes later, a young woman arrived with a phone that Damien said was encrypted and routed through several proxy servers. Laura called her father. Laura, Marcus Flock answered on the first ring. I saw the news. Carbone's restaurant. Tell me you weren't working last night. I was there, Laura said. I'm fine. I'm safe. But I need you to trust me on something. I can't explain everything right now, but I'm with people who are protecting me. Don't try to find me. Don't come to New York. I'll call you every day, but you need to let me handle this. There was a long pause. You interfered with something. Yes, and now you're in protective custody. Not exactly, but close enough. Another pause. Are the people protecting you competent? Very. Are you there voluntarily? Yes. Do you trust them? Laura looked at Damien, who was pretending not to listen. I'm not sure yet, but I trust my training, and my training says staying here is safer than leaving right now. All right, Marcus said. I'll give you 48 hours. But Laura, call me every day at this same time. If you miss a call, I'm coming to New York and I'm bringing friends. Understood? Understood. Dad, thank you for teaching me to see threats. That's what saved you last night. That's what saved someone else's life last night. She could hear the smile in her father's voice. That's my girl. Stay sharp. Stay safe. After the call, Damien looked at her with new respect. Your father sounds like someone I'd like to meet under better circumstances. He'd probably like you too, Laura said. He appreciates professionals. The apartment door opened, and William entered with Violet Nelson. Laura recognized the woman from the restaurant. She'd been dining alone 3 tables away from William the night before. Laura, William said, this is Violet. She's going to explain what we know so far. Violet set up a laptop on the dining table, her movements precise and efficient. At 9:47 p.m. last night, a sniper positioned in a building under construction at 183 Thompson Street fired 2 shots at the restaurant. The shooter used a suppressed rifle, probably a .308, fired from approximately 150 yards. Professional setup, professional execution. The spotter inside the restaurant was never identified. He escaped through the kitchen and vanished into the neighborhood. We have security footage, but his face was partially obscured. She pulled up images on the laptop, screenshots from various security cameras, showing the man Laura had seen. His face was visible from some angles, obscured from others. The NYPD is investigating this as an attempted murder, Violet continued. The FBI is interested because the target, William, has a certain profile that attracts federal attention. The media is calling it a mob hit, which is both accurate and not accurate. Who ordered it? Laura asked. That's the interesting question, William said, because the answer isn't what you'd expect. Over the next 2 hours, Violet and William explained something that fundamentally changed how Laura understood what had happened. The person who wanted William Mahon dead wasn't a rival criminal. It was an FBI assistant director named Thomas Crane. 3 months ago, William explained, I was approached by someone claiming to represent certain interests within the Bureau. They wanted me to help them build a case against someone in New York's political establishment. Someone powerful, someone protected. They wanted to use my organization's financial infrastructure to create evidence of money laundering that would justify bringing this person down. They wanted you to manufacture evidence, Laura said. Essentially, yes. I refused. Not because I have any moral opposition to bringing down corrupt politicians, but because I understood what they were really asking me to do. Make myself expendable. Once I'd served my purpose, they'd flip me, use me to testify, and then make sure I had an accident before I could implicate anyone in the Bureau. So they decided to eliminate you instead, Laura said. Not immediately. First they tried pressure. That's when the clumsy attempt started. The car, the package. They were trying to scare me into cooperation. But I don't scare easily, so they escalated. Violet pulled up new files on the laptop. Phone records, financial transactions, surveillance photos. We've been building a parallel investigation for the past 2 months. William's organization might be involved in criminal activities, but we also employ some very talented intelligence professionals. What we've found is that Assistant Director Crane has been running an unauthorized operation targeting certain political figures in New York. He's using Bureau resources, but keeping it off the books. And he needs a criminal organization to be the scapegoat for the evidence he's manufacturing. Why not just arrest you on whatever charges you're already guilty of? Laura asked. William smiled. Because I'm very careful about insulation. The FBI could probably build a case against me, but it would take years and might not stick. More importantly, any case against me would expose their own investigation into the political target they really want. They need me to be a willing participant in a very specific frame job. And when I said no, I became a problem that needed to be eliminated. So a federal law enforcement official tried to have you assassinated. That's what we believe, yes. We can't prove it yet, but we're working on it. Laura sat back, processing this. It was almost too surreal. She'd spent the last 12 hours assuming she'd been caught up in mob violence. But the truth was somehow both more mundane and more disturbing. She'd stumbled into a dirty federal operation. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you're involved now whether you want to be or not, William said. And because I need your help. My help with what? Staying alive long enough to prove what's happening. And maybe, if you're willing, helping me bring down the people who tried to kill me. William laid out his plan over coffee and bagels from Russ and Daughters that Damien had brought up from the Lower East Side. The FBI believes I'm either dead or in hiding, William explained. The media is running with the mob boss assassination attempt narrative, which is exactly what Crane wants. It makes me look like a criminal target, and it means no one's asking questions about federal involvement. But you survived, Laura said. Because of you. Which means you're the only witness who can directly contradict the narrative they're building. You saw the spotter. You saw the laser sight. Most importantly, you saw me, a legitimate businessman having dinner alone, get targeted by a professional hit in a public place. That doesn't fit the mob violence story. You want me to testify? Eventually, yes. But first we need to build an airtight case. And that's going to take time and resources. Violet took over. We need to identify everyone involved in the hit. The shooter, the spotter, whoever ordered it, whoever paid for it. We need to trace the money, trace the communications, and build a chain of evidence that connects it all back to Thomas Crane. How long will that take? Laura asked. Weeks at minimum, Violet said. Possibly months. And in the meantime? In the meantime, William said, you stay dead. He pulled up a news article on his phone and showed it to Laura. The headline read, Waitress killed in Greenwich Village restaurant shooting. Laura stared at her own name in the article. What? The NYPD released a statement this morning identifying one fatality in last night's shooting, William explained. Laura Flock, 28, a restaurant employee who was struck by gunfire while serving customers. It's not true, obviously, but it serves several purposes. First, it takes you off the board as a witness. Crane's people will stop looking for you because they think you're dead. Second, it gives us time to work without them knowing what we're doing. And third, it keeps you safe. You faked my death without asking me. I had someone in the NYPD who owes me a favor release incorrect information, William said calmly. It's temporary, and it can be corrected once we're ready to go public with everything. But for now, Laura Flock is dead, which means the woman sitting in this apartment is free to help us without anyone watching her. Laura stood up, pacing to the windows. She looked out at Central Park, at the city stretching out below, at the life she'd been living just 24 hours ago that now seemed impossibly distant. "You're asking me to disappear," she said. "To give up my life, my apartment, my job, my career. To become someone else while you build your case against a federal agent." "Yes," William said simply. "I'm asking you to do something extremely difficult and unfair. And I'm offering you very little in return except the knowledge that you'll be helping take down a corrupt system and keeping yourself alive in the process." "What about my father? My friends? They'll think I'm dead." "Your father knows you're alive. You'll call him every day on the secure line. As for friends, this is the hardest part. They'll mourn you for a while. But when this is over, you'll come back. You'll have been in witness protection, or recovering from trauma, or any number of plausible explanations. The relationships that matter will survive." Laura turned back to face William. "And if I say no? Then Damien will take you to a police station right now. You'll give your statement. Your name and face will be all over the news by tonight, and Crane's people will know exactly where to find you. You'll spend the next few months, or years, looking over your shoulder, wondering if every stranger on the street is the person sent to clean up loose ends. Maybe they'll leave you alone. Maybe they'll decide you're not a threat. Or maybe you'll end up as an unsolved disappearance 6 months from now." It wasn't a threat. William's tone was matter-of-fact, almost sympathetic. He was just laying out the options clearly. Laura thought about everything her father had taught her about threat assessment, about understanding situations completely before making decisions. She thought about the red dot on William's chest, about the calm way he'd handled the chaos, about the fact that someone was willing to commit murder in a crowded Manhattan restaurant to achieve their goals. "If I help you," she said, "I need conditions." "Name them." "First, I call my father every day. No exceptions. Second, I'm not a prisoner. I can leave whenever I want and you won't stop me. Third, if at any point I think you're lying to me or using me for something other than what you're saying, I walk away and you don't follow. And fourth, when this is over, you help me rebuild my life. New apartment, compensation for lost income, references for work. You put me back together." William nodded. "Agreed to all of it. You're not a prisoner, you're a partner. And when this is over, I'll do more than help you rebuild. I'll make sure you're set up better than you were before." "Then I'm in," Laura said. "Let's catch the people who tried to kill you." The transformation began immediately. Violet took charge of creating Laura's new identity. Not a complete change, but enough to let her move around the city without being recognized. "The key," Violet explained, "is to change context, not appearance." Laura Flock was a waitress who wore her hair up, wore minimal makeup, and dressed for a restaurant job. "We're going to make you look like someone who works in finance. Same face, different context. People see what they expect to see." Over the next few days, Laura learned how William's organization actually functioned. It was nothing like the movie version of organized crime. There were no dark rooms full of cigar smoke, no violent enforcers, no dramatic confrontations. Instead, there were offices that looked like any other Manhattan offices. There were people working on computers, making phone calls, attending meetings. The illegal activities happened in spreadsheets and encrypted communications, in shell companies and offshore accounts, in the gaps between legal and illegal that most people didn't even know existed. Deborah Patterson ran operations from her private investigation firm in Tribeca, a sleek office space that employed 12 people, most of whom were doing completely legitimate work. Deborah showed Laura how they tracked targets using publicly available information: social media, property records, court filings, business registrations. 90% of what we need to know about someone is publicly available, Deborah explained. You just have to know where to look and how to connect the pieces. The illegal part isn't gathering the information, it's what we do with it afterward. Nelson Wright demonstrated how he pressured people without violence. "I find what matters to them," he explained. "For some people it's money. For others it's reputation. For others it's family. Everyone has something they'll pay to protect. My job is finding that thing and making it clear that protecting it is cheaper than fighting us." It was sophisticated, systematic, and completely removed from the street-level crime Laura had imagined. While Laura learned about William's organization, Violet and Damien worked on tracking the people behind the assassination attempt. They had advantages that traditional law enforcement wouldn't have. They could access information without warrants, follow leads without oversight, and use resources that existed in legal gray areas. They started with the sniper's nest. The building under construction at 183 Thompson Street had been abandoned for 3 months due to financing issues. Security was minimal, a chain-link fence and a rent-a-cop who worked overnight shifts. Damien accessed the building's security footage, legally dubious but technically possible through a consulting contract with the security company. The footage showed a person entering the building at 8:30 p.m. on the night of the shooting, carrying what appeared to be a large camera case. The kind photographers use, which would attract no attention in Manhattan. Professional choice, Damien noted. Sniper rifle breaks down into a camera case easily. Walk right past security, looking like you're doing architectural photography of the neighborhood at night. The person was visible on camera, but wore a baseball cap and kept their face mostly hidden. Height and build suggested male, probably late 30s to mid-40s, moving with the kind of controlled efficiency that suggested military or law enforcement training. They left at 10:15 p.m., 45 minutes after the shooting, which told Damien something important. They stayed to break down the weapon properly, collect brass, wipe surfaces. That's someone who's done this before and wasn't panicked. Professional discipline. Violet focused on the money. Every operation left financial traces, and assassination attempts were expensive. Someone had to pay the shooter, pay the spotter, and potentially pay whoever arranged the whole thing. She started by looking at accounts connected to Thomas Crane. Not directly, but through the network of people and organizations around him. FBI agents lived on government salaries, but Crane had a lifestyle that suggested additional income. A vacation home in the Hamptons, kids in private schools, a wife who didn't work but wore expensive jewelry. People get sloppy when they've been getting away with something for years, Violet explained to Laura as they worked side by side in the safe house apartment. Crane's been running unauthorized operations for at least 5 years based on what we can piece together. He thinks he's untouchable. That means he's stopped being as careful as he should be. She showed Laura how to track money through corporate structures. See this consulting firm? Crane Consulting Group, registered in Delaware 3 years ago. It's nominally run by Thomas Crane's brother-in-law, Marcus Weber, who lives in Connecticut. The firm has no website, no clients listed publicly, but it's received over $2 million in payments over the past 3 years from various sources. Legal payments? Laura asked. Technically, yes. Payments for strategic consulting services from companies that do business in industries the FBI regulates: finance, defense contracting, pharmaceuticals. Classic structure for legal bribery. These companies pay Crane's family firm for consulting services they probably never receive, and in exchange, Crane makes sure FBI investigations don't look too closely at their activities. So he's corrupt, but how does that connect to trying to kill William? Because one of the companies paying Crane Consulting is Meridian Strategies Group, a political consulting firm that works for Senator Patricia Wainwright. Laura recognized the name. Wainwright was New York's senior senator, a powerful figure who'd been in office for 20 years and chaired the Senate Banking Committee. Wainwright is Crane's real target, Violet continued. She's been blocking certain financial regulations that the FBI wants, and she's been using her position to protect banks and financial institutions that should probably face more scrutiny. Crane wants to bring her down, but he can't do it through normal channels because she has too much political protection. So he needs a criminal organization to manufacture evidence against her, Laura said, following the logic. Exactly. William's organization moves money for wealthy clients who want to avoid taxes or hide assets. If William could be convinced or forced to create a paper trail showing that he laundered money for Senator Wainwright, that would be enough to destroy her career and potentially put her in prison. But William said no. Which made him a liability. If he went public about what the FBI was trying to do, it would destroy Crane's career and potentially expose years of corruption. So Crane needed William dead. Laura processed this. So we're not just catching the people who tried to kill William. We're taking down a corrupt FBI agent and potentially exposing connections to political corruption at the Senate level. Now you're getting it, Violet said with a slight smile. Welcome to the complicated world we live in. 2 weeks after the shooting, they got their first major break. The spotter from the restaurant, the man with the phone and laser sight, made a mistake. He used a credit card at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. Deborah's team had been monitoring hundreds of potential identities, looking for behavioral patterns that matched someone laying low after a high-profile operation. They were looking for people who'd stopped their normal routines, who'd left the city and then returned, who were spending cash more than usual but occasionally slipped up. The credit card transaction pinged one of their monitoring systems. The name on the card was David Kowalski, and facial recognition software matched him to the man from the restaurant security footage with an 87% confidence level. "That's him," Damien confirmed, studying the images. Same build, same gait, same facial structure allowing for the different angles and lighting. They ran David Kowalski through every database they could access, both legal and otherwise. He was former NYPD, had left the force 8 years ago after an internal affairs investigation that went nowhere officially but suggested he'd been involved in something questionable. Since then, he'd worked as a private security contractor and consultant, which was often code for someone who did sensitive work for people who needed deniability. "He's perfect for this," Deborah said. "Former law enforcement means he understands procedures and knows how to avoid leaving evidence. Private contractor means he's used to working without official oversight. And his IA history suggests he's comfortable operating in gray areas." "How do we approach him?" Laura asked. She'd become increasingly involved in the investigative process, her natural intelligence and her father's training making her surprisingly effective at tactical planning. "We don't approach him directly," William said. "We make him come to us." William's plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would leak information that Laura Flock was actually alive and in protective custody, preparing to testify about what she'd seen. The information would be leaked through channels that would reach Crane's network quickly, but appear to come from a legitimate source. A corrupt NYPD detective on William's payroll who fed information to various interested parties. "Crane will panic," William predicted. "He thinks Laura's dead, which has kept him feeling secure. The moment he learns she's alive, he'll need to either silence her or find out what she knows. And the fastest way to do that is to send someone to make contact. So we're using Laura as bait," Damien said, his tone making clear he didn't love this idea. "I'm using myself as bait," Laura corrected. "And I'm okay with it if we do it right." They set up the operation carefully. Laura would be moved to a different safe house, this one in Long Island City with controlled access points and complete surveillance coverage. The leak would indicate she was meeting with federal prosecutors to give a preliminary statement, which would create urgency. Crane would know he had a limited window to act before her testimony became official. Deborah's team would provide invisible security, positioned throughout the building and surrounding area. Damien would be in tactical command, coordinating response if anything went wrong. And William would be monitoring everything from a command center they'd set up in a nearby office space. "If Kowalski comes himself, we grab him quietly and make him talk," William explained. "If he sends someone else, we identify them and add them to our evidence chain. Either way, we get closer to proving Crane's involvement." The leak went out on a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, their monitoring systems showed that someone had started researching the Long Island City address. By Thursday evening, surveillance cameras picked up David Kowalski conducting what was clearly a reconnaissance of the area. Walking past the building, timing security patrols, identifying entry and exit points. "He's going to make his move tomorrow," Damien predicted. "Friday evening, when there's normal business activity for cover, but prosecutors won't be around to actually meet with Laura." He was right. Friday at 6:30 p.m., David Kowalski entered the building carrying a messenger bag, wearing a business-casual outfit that let him blend with the building's professional tenants. He took the elevator to the 4th floor, where the safe house apartment was located. Laura was sitting in the apartment's living room, wearing a wire and surrounded by technology that monitored every word and movement. She looked nervous, which wasn't hard to fake because she was genuinely nervous. No amount of training completely eliminated the fear of confronting someone who'd tried to facilitate murder. Kowalski knocked on the door. Laura opened it, using the same threat assessment protocols she'd learned from her father, checking his hands, his body position, the space behind him. "Ms. Flock," Kowalski said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "My name is David Kowalski. I'm a private investigator working on the case related to the shooting at Carbone's. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions." "I'm not supposed to talk to anyone without my lawyer present," Laura said, following the script they'd prepared. "I understand." This will only take a moment. I'm actually here to help you. I think you might be in danger, and I want to make sure you're being properly protected. Classic approach, William had predicted. Position yourself as someone trying to help, build rapport, then either extract information or assess whether the target needs to be eliminated. What kind of danger? Laura asked, letting concern show in her voice. Can I come in? This isn't a conversation we should have in a hallway. Laura stepped back, letting him enter. The moment he crossed the threshold, he was fully visible to the cameras hidden throughout the apartment. Kowalski moved into the living room, and Laura could see him making rapid assessments. Checking the windows, noting the furniture arrangement, identifying potential threats or escape routes. Professional instincts. Ms. Flock, I need to be honest with you, Kowalski said, turning to face her. The man you saved that night, William Mahon, is not who you think he is. He's a dangerous criminal with connections throughout law enforcement and organized crime. And I'm concerned that he might have convinced you to help him with a story that isn't true. What do you mean? Laura asked. The official story is that there was a shooting, that you were killed, but that William survived. But then rumors start that you're actually alive, that you're in protective custody, that you're going to testify. It's convenient, isn't it? William gets to claim he's the victim of an assassination attempt, when the truth might be something very different. I saw the red dot on his chest, Laura said. I saw the laser sight. I saw the window shatter from the gunshot. Or maybe you saw what William wanted you to see, Kowalski said. These people are sophisticated, Ms. Flock. They stage situations. They create narratives. And they use innocent people like you to legitimize those narratives. It was a good strategy, Laura had to admit. Try to make her doubt what she'd experienced, create uncertainty, potentially flip her into questioning William's story. So what do you think really happened? She asked. I think William Mahon staged an attack on himself to eliminate some business rivals and create a reason to claim he's being persecuted. And I think he's convinced you to support his story because you genuinely believe you saved his life. Then why would someone leak that I'm alive? Why would William want that information out there if his whole plan depends on people believing his story? She saw Kowalski's expression shift slightly. He hadn't expected her to be analytical about this. That's a good question. Maybe the leak came from somewhere else. Maybe someone who knows the truth is trying to expose it. Or maybe, Laura said quietly, someone who thought I was dead learned I'm alive and needed to either silence me or discredit me before I could testify, which would mean the assassination attempt was real, and someone is very worried about what I know. Kowalski's hand moved toward his messenger bag, and Laura's training screamed at her. She was already moving when he pulled out not a weapon but a phone, turning it toward her. I'm recording this conversation, he said. I want you on record saying that William Mahon is holding you here against your will, that he's coercing your testimony, and that you want police protection from him. That would be a lie, Laura said. It would be the truth that gets you out of a dangerous situation, Kowalski pressed. Just say the words, and I'll have a police unit here in 5 minutes to extract you safely. And if I refuse, then I'll have to report that you're voluntarily cooperating with a known criminal, which makes you an accomplice rather than a witness. Your legal situation becomes much more complicated. It was the threat she'd been waiting for. The moment when Kowalski revealed he wasn't actually trying to help her, but trying to manipulate her into discrediting her own testimony. I think, Laura said carefully, you should leave now. Kowalski's expression hardened. Ms. Flock, you need to understand what you're involved in. The apartment door opened, and Damien walked in with 2 other men, all moving with practiced coordination. David Kowalski, Damien said calmly, you're going to come with us quietly, or this is going to become very difficult for you very quickly. Kowalski looked at Laura with something like disappointment. You set me up. You tried to manipulate me into lying about an assassination attempt, Laura said. I just let you think it was working. They took Kowalski to a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn, neutral territory that Williams' organization controlled. It wasn't a torture chamber or anything from a movie. It was just a large, empty space where they could have a private conversation without interruption. Kowalski sat in a chair while Damien, William, and Laura stood at various points around him. He was smart enough to know he was in serious trouble, but professional enough to stay calm. You're not going to kill me, Kowalski said confidently. If you were, you would have done it already. Which means you want something. We want you to testify against Thomas Crane, William said simply. We want you to admit that he hired you to spot for a sniper attempting to assassinate me, and we want you to provide evidence of every other operation he's hired you for. In exchange for what? In exchange for us not turning over to the FBI everything we've gathered on you over the past 2 weeks, which includes evidence of 3 felonies you've committed in that time alone. Also in exchange for a substantial amount of money that will let you start over somewhere else after you've testified. How substantial? $500,000 and a new identity. Kowalski laughed. You think I'm going to testify against an FBI assistant director for $500,000? Crane would have me killed before I finished my statement. Crane's going to prison, William said. We have enough evidence to destroy his career and put him away for decades. The question is whether you go down with him or whether you save yourself by cooperating. What evidence? Violet stepped forward with a tablet, showing Kowalski screen after screen of financial records, communications intercepts, surveillance footage. A comprehensive picture of Thomas Crane's unauthorized operations over the past 5 years. We have 12 different operations we can prove, Violet said. Attempts to entrap politicians, business people, and others Crane decided were problems. Manufactured evidence. Falsified reports. Payments to contractors like you through shell companies. It's comprehensive, it's damning, and it's going to federal prosecutors whether you cooperate or not. Kowalski studied the evidence, his expression growing more concerned. Where did you get all this? We have resources, William said. And we've been watching Crane longer than you realize. We knew something was wrong months ago. The assassination attempt just accelerated our timeline. So why do you need me? Because prosecutor wants a live witness, not just documents, Laura said, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. They want someone who can sit in front of a jury and explain exactly how the operation worked, who gave the orders, who paid them, and what the objective was. You're that person. Kowalski looked at her with something like respect. You're tougher than you look. I had a good teacher, Laura said, thinking of her father. Let me think about it, Kowalski said finally. You have 2 hours, William said. After that, we're turning everything over to the Southern District of New York's Public Corruption Unit, and you'll be named in the indictment as an uncooperative co-conspirator. Your choice is simple. Help us build the case and walk away wealthy, or refuse and spend the next 20 years in federal prison. They left him alone in the warehouse with security outside and cameras monitoring him. In a nearby office space, they watched him on video as he paced, thinking through his options. He'll flip, Damien predicted. He's a mercenary, not an ideologue. The moment he realizes Crane can't protect him anymore, he'll save himself. An hour and 40 minutes later, Kowalski called out to the guards. When they brought William back in, Kowalski said simply, I'll testify. But I want the money in advance, and I want it in cryptocurrency that can't be traced. Half now, half after you testify, William countered. Deal. With Kowalski's cooperation, the investigation moved rapidly. He provided detailed information about 6 operations he'd worked on for Crane over the past 3 years, including the attempt on William's life. He named other contractors, identified how payments were structured, and explained Crane's operational methodology. Most importantly, he provided evidence that directly connected Crane to Senator Wainwright. Crane hadn't just been running unauthorized operations. He'd been doing it with the knowledge and implicit approval of certain political figures who wanted Wainwright removed from her position of power. It's bigger than we thought, Violet said as they assembled the evidence. Crane wasn't a rogue agent acting alone. He was the point person for a coordinated effort involving at least 3 high-ranking FBI officials and political figures from both parties who wanted Wainwright gone. Why did they all want her dead? Laura asked. Not dead, neutralized, William corrected. Wainwright has been blocking financial regulations that would give federal agencies more power to investigate certain industries. She's done this because she receives substantial campaign contributions from those industries, but also because she genuinely believes in limited regulatory oversight. That's made her a target for people who want expanded federal authority and for political rivals who see an opportunity to remove a powerful senator. So everyone wanted Crane to manufacture a case against her, Laura said. And when William wouldn't cooperate, Crane decided to eliminate the problem. Exactly. And now we have enough evidence to prove all of it. They assembled a comprehensive package. Financial records, Kowalski's testimony, surveillance footage, communications intercepts, and expert analysis showing how everything connected. Then they had to decide how to deploy it. We can't go to the FBI, Damien said. Crane has too many connections there. Even if we go to people we trust, the information will leak back to him before we can act on it. We go to the Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility, Violet suggested. They investigate FBI misconduct, and they're independent enough that Crane won't have advance warning. We also leak it to the press, William added. Not everything, but enough to create public awareness. Once the story is out there, it becomes much harder for anyone to bury it. And we go to Senator Wainwright herself, Laura said. Everyone looked at her in surprise. She's the target of all this. She deserves to know what's been done in the name of taking her down. And she has resources, Senate oversight committees, congressional investigations, media contacts. If we brief her, she can help ensure this gets the attention it needs. William smiled. You've learned a lot in 3 weeks. I've had good teachers, Laura said, looking around at the people who'd become something like friends in this strange, intense situation. They moved simultaneously on all fronts. Violet delivered the evidence package to the Justice Department's Office of Professional Responsibility on a Monday morning. Walking into their offices in Washington, D.C., with a legal team and demanding an immediate investigation. William leaked selected information to 3 different journalists, one at the New York Times, one at the Washington Post, and one at a major network news organization. He gave each reporter slightly different pieces of the puzzle, ensuring they'd have to work together to see the full picture, which would create more comprehensive coverage. And Laura, wearing her first business suit and feeling like she was playing a role in a movie, met with Senator Patricia Wainwright in her Manhattan office. The senator was in her mid-60s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of commanding presence that came from decades in power. She listened to Laura's story without interruption, reviewed the evidence Laura had brought, and then sat back with an expression that was difficult to read. Ms. Flock, the senator finally said, you understand what you're alleging here? That an assistant director of the FBI has been running unauthorized operations targeting me, and that he attempted to murder someone to cover it up. Yes, ma'am. And we have proof. Why come to me? Why not just give this to prosecutors and let them handle it? Because you're the target, and you have a right to know. And because this isn't just about stopping one corrupt agent. It's about exposing a system that allowed him to operate. That's going to take political pressure, not just legal pressure. Wainwright smiled slightly. You're more sophisticated than I expected for a waitress. I'm not just a waitress, Laura said quietly. I'm someone who saved a life, almost lost her own, and decided to fight back. And I'm hoping you'll help us finish what we started. The senator studied her for a long moment. I don't like William Mahon. I know what he is and what he does. But I also don't like corrupt federal agents, and I really don't like people trying to manufacture evidence against me. So yes, Ms. Flock, I'll help you. Consider my office and my resources at your disposal. The story broke on a Thursday evening, across 3 major publications simultaneously. FBI Assistant Director under investigation for unauthorized operations. Assassination attempt linked to federal corruption. Senator targeted by rogue law enforcement officials. By Friday morning, it was the lead story on every major news outlet. By Friday afternoon, Thomas Crane had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. By Friday evening, 2 other FBI officials had been suspended, and the Justice Department had announced a comprehensive review of counterintelligence operations. Laura watched it unfold from the safe house apartment, still technically dead as far as public records showed. William had decided they should wait until the initial chaos settled before revealing she was alive. Dramatic timing would maximize the impact of her testimony. How do you feel? William asked, sitting beside her as they watched the news coverage. Strange, Laura admitted. A month ago I was auditioning for off-Broadway shows and serving pasta. Now I'm at the center of a federal corruption investigation. It doesn't feel real. It's very real. And you're the reason it's happening. If you hadn't moved fast enough that night, I'd be dead. Crane would still be operating, and Wainwright would eventually have been destroyed by manufactured evidence. You don't seem grateful, Laura observed. You seem calculating. William smiled. I'm both. I'm grateful you saved my life. That's genuine. But I'm also calculating about what comes next. The investigation will expand. Prosecutors will start looking at Crane's operations, which means they'll start looking at anyone connected to him, which means they'll eventually look more closely at me. You knew that would happen when you decided to expose him. Of course. But I'd rather face legal scrutiny for the crimes I've actually committed than be murdered for refusing to commit crimes I didn't do. At least with prosecutors, I have options. Will you go to prison? Possibly. Probably not. I'm very good at insulation, and I've been careful about what can be directly proven. But my organization will face increased attention, which means we'll need to adapt. Evolution is survival. Over the next week, the investigation expanded rapidly. 5 FBI officials were suspended. 2 resigned. Congressional oversight committees announced hearings. The media ran dozens of stories about federal overreach, political corruption, and the relationship between law enforcement and political power. And then, 10 days after the story broke, the Justice Department announced that Laura Flock, previously reported dead in the Carbone's restaurant shooting, was alive and in protective custody, preparing to testify as the key witness in the federal investigation. Laura's resurrection made headlines again. Witness believed dead emerges as key to FBI corruption case. Waitress who saved mob boss's life now taking down corrupt agents. Her phone, the secure one Damien had given her, started ringing constantly. News organizations wanted interviews. Publishers wanted book deals. Hollywood agents called about film rights. It was overwhelming. Welcome to being famous, William said with amusement. It's exhausting. I don't want to be famous, Laura said. I want my normal life back. That's not possible anymore. But you can build a new normal life. A better one. Laura testified before a federal grand jury on a cold morning in January 2020. She wore a conservative suit that Violet had helped her select, and she carried herself with the calm confidence her father had trained into her. She told the complete story. Seeing the red dot, recognizing the threat, saving William's life, the aftermath. She identified David Kowalski from photographs. She explained what she'd learned about Crane's operations. She provided context and clarity that helped prosecutors understand not just what happened, but why it mattered. The prosecutors were impressed. One told her afterward that she was one of the most credible and composed witnesses he'd encountered in 20 years of federal cases. The grand jury returned indictments against Thomas Crane and 4 other individuals, charging them with conspiracy, attempted murder, obstruction of justice, and a dozen other federal crimes. Crane's trial began in March 2020 and lasted 6 weeks. Laura testified for 2 full days, walking the jury through everything she'd seen and experienced. Kowalski testified for 3 days, providing details about the operational structure. Violet testified about the financial evidence. Other witnesses corroborated pieces of the story. The defense argued that Crane was a dedicated law enforcement officer who'd been conducting legitimate investigations that William Mahon, a known criminal, had falsely characterized as corruption. They argued that the assassination attempt had been staged by William to create a false narrative. But the evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showed payments to Kowalski through shell companies. Communications showed Crane ordering operations. Testimony from multiple witnesses created a clear picture of unauthorized activities spanning years. The jury deliberated for 4 days and returned guilty verdicts on 17 counts. Thomas Crane was sentenced to 23 years in federal prison. The other defendants received sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years. Senator Wainwright remained in office. Her political position actually strengthened by being the target of such obvious prosecutorial abuse. And William Mahon faced no charges. Prosecutors had enough evidence to know he ran criminal operations, but nothing directly admissible that could survive his legal defense. He'd been very careful over the years, and the investigation into Crane hadn't provided the opening prosecutors needed to go after him. You got lucky, Laura told him after Crane's sentencing. I got smart, William corrected. And I had help from someone extraordinary. 3 months after Crane's conviction, Laura sat in a cafe in the West Village, not far from where Carbone's restaurant had been. The restaurant had reopened, renovated, with new windows and a memorial plaque for the evening that changed everything, though it didn't provide details. Her life had changed in ways she was still processing. She'd become briefly famous. The waitress who saved the mob boss and took down corrupt FBI agents. Talk shows wanted her. Documentary filmmakers called. She'd signed with a literary agent who was shopping a book proposal. But more importantly, she discovered she had skills and instincts that went beyond acting or waiting tables. William had offered her a position in his organization. Legitimate side only, he'd promised with a knowing smile, doing security consulting and threat assessment. She declined, but not because she was opposed to the work. She declined because her father had offered her something better. A position teaching at his security training facility in Arizona, developing curriculum, and training the next generation of executive protection specialists. You learned something most people never learn, Marcus Flock had told her. You learned that you're capable of extraordinary things when the situation demands it. Now teach others to discover that about themselves. She was moving back to Arizona next month. She'd said goodbye to New York acting dreams, but she'd found something more valuable: purpose, direction, and the knowledge that she could make a difference. William had kept his promise. He'd compensated her well, enough that she could live comfortably while building her new career. He'd provided references that opened doors. And he'd given her something she hadn't expected: friendship with people who'd become important to her. Violet stopped by the cafe, impeccably dressed as always, carrying a leather folder. Your final payment, Violet said, sliding the folder across the table. Plus a little extra. William wanted to make sure you're set up properly. Laura opened the folder and saw a cashier's check for an amount that made her breath catch. This is too much, she said. You saved his life, Violet said simply. You can't put a price on that. He wanted to make sure you never have to worry about money while you're building your new career. Tell him thank you. And tell him I hope he stays safe. He will. He's more careful now. You taught him that even sophisticated people can be vulnerable. He doesn't take security for granted anymore. They sat together for a while, drinking coffee, talking about nothing important. Then Violet stood, smiled, and walked away into the Manhattan crowds. Laura finished her coffee, paid, and walked slowly through the West Village streets. She passed Carbone's, where a new crew of waiters and waitresses were preparing for the evening service, none of them knowing the history of the building they worked in. She thought about the red dot, about 3 seconds to make a decision, about how everything could change in a moment. She'd come to New York to become an actress, to play roles written by other people. Instead, she'd become the hero of her own story, written in real time with real stakes. It hadn't been the life she'd planned, but it had been the life she needed. Laura stood in front of a classroom in Tucson, Arizona, teaching 15 security professionals about threat assessment and tactical awareness. On the whiteboard behind her, she'd written, "See everything. React to what matters. Trust your training." Her father sat in the back, watching with quiet pride. After class, as students filed out, one of them, a young woman about Laura's age, approached her. "Can I ask you something?" the woman said. "The story about you in New York, it's all over the internet. People say you saved someone's life just by being alert. Is it true?" Laura smiled. "It's true. I saw something that didn't fit the pattern, and I acted on instinct. That's what this course teaches. How to recognize danger fast enough to do something about it." Was it scary? Terrifying. But I didn't have time to be scared until afterward. In the moment, I just moved. That's what training does. It makes the right response automatic, so you don't have to think your way through a crisis. The woman nodded, absorbing this. "I want to learn to do that." "Then you're in the right place," Laura said. "Let's get started." As the woman left, Marcus Flock walked over. "You're a natural teacher," he said. "I learned from the best," Laura replied. "You learned more than I taught you," Marcus said. "You learned that knowledge means nothing if you're not willing to use it. That's the hardest lesson, and you mastered it in 3 seconds." Laura thought about William Mahon, about the red dot on his chest, about the choice she'd made without thinking. "I got lucky," she said. "No," her father corrected. "You got ready. And when the moment came, you were prepared. That's not luck. That's excellence." Somewhere in Manhattan, William Mahon sat in his office on the 42nd floor of a midtown building, looking out at the city he'd built his empire in. His organization had adapted, evolved, become even more sophisticated in response to increased scrutiny. On his desk was a framed photograph, the only personal item in the entire office. It showed a moment captured by security camera footage. Laura Flock, mid-motion, dropping a tray of pasta and diving toward him as the restaurant window shattered behind her. He looked at it every day, a reminder that power and money and sophistication meant nothing if you couldn't recognize the people who mattered when they appeared. His phone buzzed with a message from Violet. "Next quarter projections look strong. The organization is healthy." He typed back, "Good. Keep it that way." Then he turned back to the window, watching the sun set over the city, thinking about red dots and split-second decisions, and the extraordinary people who change everything without even trying. Laura Flock had saved his life. In return, he'd helped her discover who she really was. It seemed like a fair trade.